Joining us now is Chris Bell, a Democrat running for U.S. Senate. Welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it, John.
So some Texans will remember you as a former congressman and a one-time candidate for governor. What should voters know about you right now? Why do you plan to run for Senate?
I can't stand the direction of the country, and I really want to take our country back. And I think in order to accomplish that, it's going to take individuals with experience to run against John Cornyn and to be able to take him down. And I can't stand the fact that we have Donald Trump's chief water boy as our United States Senator. I think Texas deserves better leadership.
Yeah, one of the top issues for Texas voters is health care. You've said that you support Medicare for all. What would you do to work toward this issue, considering how divided the Senate is on it?
Well, what I really favor is access to Medicare for all. I think there's going to have to be a public option if the private insurance companies are ever going to play fairly with consumers. While I think the Affordable Care Act was a big step in the right direction, it did a lot more for accessibility than it did for affordability. And there are those who like their private insurance plans, and I don't want to see them taken away, but for others who have really found this whole system to be a nightmare, I do think they should have the ability to buy into a public option.
How would you pay for this?
Well, I think we're going to have to look at the overall economic situation in the United States. I think Donald Trump's tax plan has been a disaster. I think there are a lot of other ways to increase revenue for the United States, and a lot of those ideas are being taken, talked about now, whether that's a value-added tax, whether we're going to have to look at some type of wealth tax to have wealthier individuals paying their fair share. I think all of those things are going to be on the table.
You know, Texas has seen several mass shootings in recent history. This is also a very divisive issue in Congress right now. What would you do as a senator when it comes to this topic?
Well, certainly I support universal background checks, and I support the red flag laws along with 80 to 90% of other Americans. And it's another good example of how broken our democracy is, that many people could agree and then Congress still refuses to act. But I also think we need to go further than that. I, for a long time, have advocated for a ban and buyback program similar to what we see in Australia. I think it would work. I think people should be compensated for those weapons because they bought them lawfully, but we don't need weapons of war in the hands of citizens.
Immigration is another topic that is certainly getting a lot of play in the news. What do you think needs to happen to address our immigration system here in the U.S.?
Well, we used just to talk about the fact that we needed more Border Patrol agents, to take greater advantage of technology, to guard a wider swath of the border, and to find a pathway to citizenship. And it was, fairly succinct. But now, because of the actions of Donald Trump, all of which have been supported by John Cornyn, the situation is so much more dreadful in that I think we're going to have to immediately try to turn around some of the policies that he's put in place. The detention camps, have been a nightmare. I can't believe that we've risen that level of cruelty here in the United States. The fact that you can't seek asylum at the border, I think another step in the wrong direction. And all this talk about a wall. A wall would be insane. You build a 30-foot wall, you create a great market for 32-foot ladders. It just doesn't make any sense, and it would be a huge waste of money.
DACA recently went before the Supreme Court. If the High Court decides to end that program, what do you think lawmakers should do about Dreamers?
We try to pass legislation as soon as possible. I think that's the first order of business because obviously it's not their fault. And it would be terrible to send them back to countries where they've never lived. And so that would be the first order of business, but we really need to find a way to stop shoving people into the shadows. It's not doing us any favors. I think people here in Texas understand what a key part of our economy the immigrant labor force has become, and we're never going to be able to deport billions of people from the United States. It's just not going to happen.
You mentioned the economy earlier. Obviously, Texas is a big oil state, but you've also talked a lot about climate change in this campaign. How do you make that balance in a state like Texas?
I think it's really easy, and that's the good news. What the bad news is that we haven't been leading. And because of our abundance of renewable resources, whether we're talking about wind, solar, or hydrogen, we're in a perfect position to continue to be the energy capital of the world well into the the future. And I don't think you roll over oil and gas companies. Oil and gas is not going away. It's going to continue to be around. And if you talk to folks in the oil and gas industry, they will tell you that they want to work with the government to solve this crisis. And we were making steps in the right direction under the Obama administration. Emissions were being reduced. Then Donald Trump comes in and says that all the regulations are going to be lifted. That was a huge step in the wrong direction, another one that John Cornyn supported. I think finally even John Cornyn may be waking up to the fact that there is climate change and that the science is real. And we can't keep sticking our heads in the sand. Speaking
of Cornyn, there are several Democrats that are also running with you to face him next year. What makes you the best candidate to stand out? Experience. I think that John Cornyn, while he's very vulnerable, his polling numbers are certainly not what you would expect for someone who has been in statewide office for 35 years and 17 of those in the U.S. Senate, but he's not going to be a pushover. And I think it's going to take somebody with congressional experience and who's run statewide before to take him on and take him down. And that's the main reason I got in this race. When I looked at the potential field, I knew that experience was going to be a major factor. And as I reach out to people around the state and talk to them, they see it too. Chris Bell, thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Sure.